in Philadelphia awaiting a press conference, a part of the Trump legal team. Brian, Libby, and Philip here covering all the events here in Philadelphia. As yesterday, as you noticed, we were at the rally, kind of the recount support, many from people from the left. For that today, coming up after this press conference, we'll be back down in Philadelphia outside the convention center for an official Trump rally that was called yesterday. So as we await this press conference, guys, what do you anticipate we're going to hear from? I know we have several people that are going to talk today.
Yes, thanks, Brian. I really appreciate it. We're expected to hear from former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani, who's obviously a close advisor to the president, and former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi, as well as senior advisor Corey Lewandowski, will be set to speak here any moment in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We're a little bit outside the city right now. We're somewhat in the suburbs of Philadelphia, but it's still considered Philadelphia, and we're here, and they're going to be speaking. I'm not sure what the message that they're going to send today is, but I'm sure it will be something along the lines of, we're still in this, we want a fair election, and that is what we're going to fight to do.
Yeah, thanks, Philip. I'm also expecting they might mention something about Supreme Court Justice Alito's court order that they had to separate the ballots in Pennsylvania received after the election date. Not sure what the court will rule on that eventually, and if that will make an impact, but that'll definitely, I think, be relevant to their conversation today. So we'll see what holds there, and we're really excited to also bring to you guys the rally later today. We were walking around town this morning, just scoping out the area. We saw that there were actually barriers in the street now, showing that they're expecting a pretty large gathering here today. So we'll be bringing that to you once we get back from the press conference here.
And I want to add to that, I noticed the theme is very different downtown than it was yesterday. It very much sounds like a Trump rally. You've got the music that you typically hear from a Trump campaign rally. So they've got the sound system set up. I'm sure they're going to have thousands of supporters down there. If you watch the coverage yesterday, it's a very tiny area. So imagine on a Saturday, it is probably 71 and sunny here, beautiful weather here in Philadelphia. I anticipate a very large turnout for this rally, and of course we'll be there to bring all that over to you as well. So what you're taking a look at now is live. They're doing some audio checks here. I think we're probably about 5-6 minutes out from the official start. We were given the 15-minute warning about 10 minutes ago, but if you're just joining us, welcome. We are live in Philadelphia at the Four Seasons Landscaping, and this is wasn't the first choice I thought that this would happen at, but nevertheless, this is where we're at right here, and I'm imagining we're going to hear a lot of optimistic as far as the election goes. And of course, we all think that this election was not fair. These votes were not counted correctly, and there was some illegal votes and some votes that were casted after November 3rd. And we just want to get to the bottom of it. We just want a fair election, and we think that we can get to that, but we've just got to keep challenging.
And this is breaking news right now. Joe Biden is the projected winner of the 2020 presidential election. So that means that this would make Joe Biden have projected Joe Biden to be the winner, and they will now project this image that he is the president-elect of the United States. What are your thoughts on that, Brian?
It's very interesting you say that, because I've noticed the press corps here, everyone's looking down at their phones, getting that alert. So now everyone's is aware of that notification that just was pushed out. Now, I would imagine you're going to hear that response from the Trump legal team today in response to that, I guess, claim that this thing is over, right? But we know that this is not over, that we knew it was going to go to the courts. We know it's going to take a higher power to get things to go the right way. But there you have it. I mean, you're hearing breaking news right here on Right Side Broadcasting. Of course, we want to thank everybody for watching us right now. We can really appreciate it if you tag a friend, share this broadcast. We need to get as many eyeballs on it as possible. This is a very important day in American history, and we're just proud to be a part of it and have everyone watching.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Brian. The AP, the Associated Press, which is here today, called the race for Joe Biden at 11:25 a.m. this morning, after saying that Joseph R. Biden secured the state of Pennsylvania and its electoral votes, which would have pushed him over the top, according to them. I'm just looking at reports from NBC, NPR, Philadelphia Inquirer, all saying that Joe Biden will be president-elect and the 46th president of the United States. We're going to keep fighting. I'm sure Team Trump is not going to give up. The Trump campaign is not going to give up. They're going to keep fighting, and that is absolutely what we have to do to make sure that there is a fair election above all.
Yeah, and I think something that's important to remember is that the mainstream media will call this for Joe Biden, but that doesn't really mean anything until it's contested in the courts and the courts make a decision, because we know that Team Trump will bring it there. So we also know that the media was completely on Joe Biden's side, and they want you to take their narrative, basically. So just consider that whenever you're reading these headlines, that they're calling it for Joe Biden as president-elect. Also, for this rally today, I know that I'm curious how they're going to fit so many people down there. I know we were having trouble finding parking in the city of Philly, so I'm curious how we're going to get thousands more parked in there.
And what's interesting about that is, especially after the AP has announced the winner, so now Trump supporters anywhere around Philly, I'm making a call out to you right now, head down to Arch and 12th Street, right outside the convention center. This is the time now to gather and rise up, as Trump Nation typically does when we go to a rally. So definitely do that, because today's a very important day, and we need to show the president that we have his back. And I know everyone here at Right Side Broadcasting, he's known this from day one. He watches this broadcast. He knows that we have his back, but we want to show the millions of Americans across this country that are showing support for this president despite what we've seen. And to your point, mainstream media has called this election almost 4 years ago, right? And of course, big tech, Twitter, big social media companies as well. There's censorship across the board in terms of showing a conservative support and exposing a lot of the fraud that we've seen in the voting process. It has been suppressed. It has been censored. And you know what? The time is going to come where people are going to have to answer some questions to what happened.
Yeah, and I saw a tweet yesterday. I think this guy on Twitter was testing Twitter, and he made two claims. One, he said Joe Biden won Pennsylvania, and one that Trump won Pennsylvania, President Trump won Pennsylvania. And they censored the one that said President Trump won Pennsylvania for false news, basically, but not the one that said Joe Biden was. So that just shows you right there where they stand, if we didn't already know.
Absolutely. As you stand here real quickly, you're probably hearing some horns honk and people driving by. There's a lot of Trump supporters that you cannot see. They're not allowed in here. So if you're wondering right now why you're not seeing any supporters, because this was media only. Now, we've seen some activity outside right now. We don't know what's going on, but supporters were not allowed to come in here. But once the message gets out there that Biden won this thing, you're going to see, well, now we got some people running out in the streets right now. I don't know what's going on. I tell you what, why don't you guys stay here? I'm gonna break to the front to see what's happening, so you guys stay here.
Okay, so Brian's going to go over there, see what's happening. We have a lot of movement. We'll try to get you guys the information on that. So, Philip, do you think this call by the mainstream media will make supporters more fired up?
I believe so. I think it's important, but I also want to clarify that Right Side Broadcasting Network has not called the election for Joe Biden, just so we put that out there.
And, and actually, nor should we. Anyway, we're not a part of the electoral process. I don't think any Twitter, any Facebook, and really any media outlet, this has to be official. This has to come from election officials. So let's not jump the gun on any of this. And in all fairness, and by the way, I did kind of peek my eye around the corner. We heard a lot of commotion going on in front. I think it was just some supporters out in the street and cars going by, because there's a lot of people out there, and there's blocking the street. So it's nothing I don't think happened just now, but we are waiting. We're probably about 5 minutes out from this press conference. If you're just joining us, welcome. We are live in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, waiting Trump legal team to make a comment, a few words. I would imagine they're going to talk about what just happened and what was just declared by the AP, and so we'll see what the reaction is to that.
And, I always heard the saying, just because you see it on the internet doesn't mean it's true. Well, I think the same thing is true. Just because you hear it on the news doesn't mean that it's true. And, who's to say that the media, which can be obviously so biased, can have a say in who wins the election? It almost seems as if they've illegitimately made these calls, and it paints a bad picture, because then it leaves people unknowing what actually is the truth. And I think that is the dangerous part about the media in this country.
Absolutely. I've talked to a lot of foreign press over the last day or so, and that's exactly what they've said, actually, is it's irresponsible as journalists, which have, quite honestly, have become activists in a lot of ways, to make these claims irresponsibly without facts, without data, without someone saying, yes, that is true. And we've seen it. We've seen states during the election night flip from Trump to Biden, Biden to Trump, back and forth. And I think that's irresponsible. Calling races that are super close, calling it either side is wrong. And it's also wrong that if you have someone has a double-digit lead in a state, why you don't call it. Like I don't. That's what I don't understand. That's been one of the biggest concerns with me, is we've seen states like Pennsylvania where Trump was up 700,000 votes at one point, and then magically overnight it dwindled down to nothing. He's behind. And I think that's really what we want, some clarification on that. And we've seen that the voting officials have not been able to go and oversight and properly to make sure that the process is going legally, it's transparent, and I think that's what we all want as Americans. We want a transparent election.
Absolutely, Brian. And also, what happened to races being won on election night? Now, obviously, there was a little bit of an issue with Bush versus Gore in 2000, with the hanging chads in Florida. That was one state. This election cycle, there has been 7 states that went undecided, or so 7 or 8 states that have went undecided into the next morning. It just seems that they didn't have their ducks in a row, and more than they didn't have their ducks in a row, it set up for a total fraudulent voting process to happen. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's funny that all the states that you mentioned who stopped counting that night were ahead for President Trump, and then the next day they suddenly were not. And if any objective media outlet, or just anyone fair, which is what they're supposed to be, would definitely not call this race whenever there were so many outstanding lawsuits with the Trump campaign. If they were being objective, they would at least wait and see how those turn out. But clearly, since they are not, they want to control what you think about it, make you think it's over, there's no hope, and they want you to stop fighting. So don't do that. Don't go along with their narrative, and make sure you keep praying, keep fighting, and doing what you can for this election.
And oddly enough, if you're taking a look at behind the facility, of course, you had a shot at the podium earlier. This is Four Seasons Landscaping is where this is taking place, and it seems to be some type of family business, what it is here. So we're in the back parking lot here, and as we bring this to you, this is a very important day in American history, as they have declared Joe Biden the president, 46th president of the United States, but yet there's so many unanswered questions right now, and you can take a look at some of the presses here, and there's press from all around the world, as we typically have found in the last 2-3 weeks of this campaign. We've got about every country represented here. Of course, the mainstream media is here as well. The AP, many NPR is here as well. So there's a lot of media outlets, and this is it, folks. This is not only this is game day. This is overtime. This is, and put it in football perspective, the moments adhere for clarification. Of course, I would expect the Trump legal team to answer a lot of questions that many of us had, and let's just be transparent right now. I'm taking the gloves off today. I'm going to ask the questions. I want a message from Team Trump to the mainstream media on their thoughts of how the whole thing was covered. So I'm going to ask that a little bit later when it goes to questions later. But yeah, what a monumental day here in our country, and you're witnessing it as well as we all stand here at Four Seasons Landscape. This is not where we thought we'd stand on a Saturday after the election.
Are we surprised 5 years later? Poor media coverage. I think I saw a statistic, 92% of media coverage of the Trump administration has been negative coverage. Are we honestly surprised that just now, 7 days after the election, the media decided that they were going to be fair? I'm not surprised one bit. I don't think that this is something that was unexpected or a surprise. This was completely expected for the mainstream media to pander to the Democrat Party and illegitimately make these claims to strike indecisiveness and fear in the American people about what the future of the country is going to look like. But here at Right Side Broadcasting Network, we are dedicated to bringing you the truth and bringing you the facts, and we're going to continue to do so. That's why we're here today, to cut through the minutia.
Thanks, Philip. And I think it doesn't take a political analyst to know exactly what the next narrative of the mainstream media is. They'll tell you that he is not accepting the results of the election and that he's keep fighting for an illegitimate presidency, which is very funny considering they spent 3 years trying to impeach him and didn't accept the terms of the last election. So they'll accuse him of that, know that ahead of time. That's going to be the narrative. And you just have to consider that whenever you're hearing the mainstream media. Don't let it get you down, because we already know. They'll tell you that, he's a fascist dictator, but when you think about it, if he was really a fascist dictator, wouldn't he have rigged the election so he won and there would be no shot of him losing? Just in my knowledge of how fascist dictators have run elections, they wouldn't leave it up for chance for them to not be in power. So I think you just have to consider the narrative that will be coming from the mainstream media and know how to combat that.
Thank you so much, Libby. You're so right about everything that you just said. It couldn't be more true. It seems like that's actually what is coming from the other side of the aisle. So that is something to consider. 25 seconds ago, Fox News projected Biden to defeat Trump to become 46th president after winning Nevada and Pennsylvania. Yet again, time and time again, the mainstream media has let the American people down, pushing falsehoods, pushing untruths, pushing things that aren't even legitimate. I don't think this election, the turnout is legitimate. There's definitely been fraud in this election, and the American people deserve a free and fair election. This is the United States of America. Like you're saying, Libby, we are not a fascist country. We are not run by a dictator. Things deserve to be done the right way, and that is what the Trump campaign is going to be pushing for here today. Rudy Giuliani, Pam Bondi, Corey Lewandowski out here making sure that there's a free and fair election for every single American, no matter who they voted for.
It's interesting. I had a conversation with my parents a couple of days ago, and they had no idea about any of these allegations for voter fraud. I said, well, of course you don't, because you're watching the mainstream media. A large majority of Americans have no idea what has gone on. Of course, we do. We're connected. We see it. We cover it. And I would say to a certain extent, Fox News does too. But overall, they have ignored all the discrepancies in this election, and they want you to ignore it. They don't want you to know it. They want you, the average American right now watching, or that's perhaps at Home Depot right now shopping, they want them to understand that Joe Biden is the winner of this election, hands down, end of story. That is not the case, and you're going to see this in the courts. We all know this. We've been talking about this for a month now, that this could happen, and we're going to see it.
And if you haven't yet seen any evidence of fraud, I was actually listening to a podcast this morning by the Daily Signal, which is part of the Heritage Foundation, a conservative think tank down in Washington, D.C., and they were interviewing a pro bono lawyer from, he was in Pittsburgh actually, trying to be a Republican poll watcher and was organizing all of that. And his experience he was sharing with the Daily Signal there was that Republican canvassers, pre-canvassers, were not being treated fairly. Some of them weren't allowed in the poll locations, even though that was their right to do so. People were saying, oh, they're Trumpers, we won't let them in. And even though that wasn't necessarily evidence of fraud, it's very suspicious, because if you have nothing to hide, you should absolutely want both sides to be able to watch you if you're not doing anything that's sketchy. So right there, if you want to go listen to that and find some evidence, that was on the Daily Signal, and I thought that was a really interesting perspective on what he was hearing actually in Pittsburgh. So 20 electoral votes of Pennsylvania up there, and that's not an isolated experience. What do you think about that, Brian?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Shifting gears real quickly, I read something this morning. This is greater than just a President Trump presidency or a Joe Biden presidency. This is literally on the brink of what we know this country and how it was founded, Judeo-Christian values. I think that Joe Biden is nothing but a puppet for the radical left to come in this country and remove all presence of God, all presence throughout the fabric of our country. This is, I hate to say it, but this is good versus evil here. And I know that you get a lot of kickback on that, but it's absolutely true. You tell me one thing that the radical left stands for that is biblical based. Nothing. I'm all about equal opportunity, but we cannot have equal outcome. That's called socialism, and that is on the brink. And I know that they fight back on those words, and they denounce that they're a part of that, but that is their disguise. They are nothing but a socialist plan for this country. And if you're young and you're watching this right now, this is not the country that I grew up. I'm 51 years old. I can tell you right now that is not what I grew up on. Let's see if we get a couple little standbys on that. We might be getting closer and closer to getting this thing started as we're moments away. If you're just now joining us live, we are in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, awaiting the press conference from the Trump legal team. I'm sure in response to today's earlier moments ago declaring Joe Biden the victor as the 46th president of the United States. I would imagine that we're going to hear some comments from the Trump team in regards to that, and of course take some questions from the press.
Stand right over here. Yes, sir. In just a second. Careful to reach your own wire.
Yeah. Everybody should be staying. Beautiful day. Sure is. Yeah, that's a hell of a lot of candy. Walk the knees too. That'd be great. Good job as you doing all the folks.
I will be.
Yeah.
Pandemic hit right when I started my term.
Wow, what a beautiful day. Thank you. Thank you for coming. So I'm here on behalf of the Trump campaign as an attorney for the president to describe to you the first part of a situation that is extremely troubling. First of all, for the state of Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and then for a number of other states. And these lawsuits will be brought starting on Monday. But the first time it was discovered was here in Pennsylvania just a couple of days ago. The people you see behind me are just a few of about, I'd say, 50 to 60 poll watchers who will all testify that they were uniformly, will wait. That they were uniformly deprived of their right to inspect any single part of the mail-in ballots. As you know, from the very beginning, the mail-in ballots were a source of some degree of skepticism, if not a lot of skepticism, as being innately prone to fraud. The New York Times had written that 10 years ago under other circumstances, but of course changed their mind once it was a situation involving President Trump. Congresswoman Jordan, in her vast and compendious review of various forms of voter fraud, cited mail-in ballots as the most prone to fraud. With all that, you would have expected there'd be a high degree of security and a high degree of inspection that would be provided for mail-in ballots. Instead, in the wisdom of the officials, Democrat officials here in a city that's been Democrat for 60 years and has a very long history of voter fraud, documented history of voter fraud, instead of going to a high degree of care to allow inspections of the mail-in ballots, there was no inspection of a single mail-in ballot. Those mail-in ballots could have been for anybody. Those mail-in ballots could have been for anybody they wrote in. Those mail-in ballots could have been written the day before by the Democratic Party hacks that were all over the convention center. What I'm saying to you is not a single one was inspected, as the law required. Even when a court order was obtained to allow the Republican inspectors to get 6 feet closer, they moved the people counting the ballots 6 further feet away. It's really simple. If you have nothing to hide with these mail-in ballots, you allow inspection. I mean, this is common knowledge, common practice in the examination of absentee ballots, which happens all the time. You take out the absentee ballot, you open it up, the Republican looks at it, the Democrat looks at it. If nobody objects, you put it in the pile. If either objects, you put it aside. That's what's done for absentee ballots, which have the extra security of having signatures you can match. Here, which a much more insecure method of voting, no Republican got a chance to look at that ballot. Some of the ballots you will see looked suspicious. From very far away, they look like same pen, possibly same handwriting. We can't say that because we never got to see it. Now, you're also going to find that way across, on the other side of the state, there is a similar situation in Pittsburgh involving 300,000 ballots that were uninspected, unreviewed, not observed by a single Republican. Not a single one. It's got to be a pattern. As a friend of mine says, I don't believe in conspiracies, but I also don't believe in coincidences. Kind of funny that all Republicans were rejected here, and all Republicans were rejected in Pittsburgh, and it amounts to about, just about the 700,000 votes that President Trump was ahead by 2 days ago that disappeared. And we have no way of knowing, because we were deprived of the right to inspect, if a single one of those ballots is legitimate. That is unheard of. It's illegal. It's unconstitutional. And we will be bringing an action challenging that. And I emphasize to you, it's only one of the many other infirmities in this election. I know this city has a sad history of voter fraud. After all, Joe Frazier is still voting here. Kind of hard since he died 5 years ago, but Joe continues to vote. If I recall correctly, Joe was a Republican, so maybe I shouldn't complain. But we should go see if Joe is voting Republican or Democrat now from the grave. Also, Will Smith's father has voted here twice since he died. I don't know how he votes because his vote is secret. In Philadelphia, they keep the votes of dead people secret. At least that is something that you can be commended for. I'm not attacking the people of Philadelphia. I'm attacking a decrepit democratic machine, which has a lot of other reasons to be attacked. It's been around for 65 years. You keep electing the same people. The city gets no better. The crime goes way through the roof. The riots you have, the police stand by and watch it, not because of the police, because you have a mayor that lets them stand by and watch it. You got a district attorney who lets people go free. You are poorly served, ladies and gentlemen of Philadelphia. And then you got a political machine. Mayors who let riots take place, district attorneys who set criminals free. I don't think they're going to care much about ballot fraud. This is outrageous. In an enormously important contest with a very, very suspect method of voting, there was no security. Zero. The people of this city, people of this country, have no assurance at all that those ballots were actually cast. They would have to have been almost unanimously cast for Joe Biden in order to catch up. And let me have one or two of the people, let me emphasize, this is only 2 or 3 of about 50 people so far that have given us statements, affidavits, recordings. We're going to have many, many witnesses. It's not a small case. It can be a big case. But I wanted you to get the flavor of it here in Philadelphia, because we also have to alert the people of Pittsburgh that the same fraud was done to them as here. And I'll also add, same thing was done in Georgia. The same thing was done in Michigan. The same thing was done in North Carolina. Seems to me somebody from the Democratic National Committee sent out a little note that said, don't let the Republicans look at those mail-in ballots, at least not in the big Democratic hack cities that we control. We've done a lot to destroy those cities, and now we're going to destroy their right to vote. So let's start off first. My friend, you just tell briefly what happened to you, who you are, and what happened to you like you described it before.
I am Daryl Brooks. I'm in Philadelphia. Okay.
Take your mask if you need. Take your mask off.
Okay, take it off.
Take your mask off.
Okay. All right. Daryl Brooks, Philadelphia resident. Here for about 2 years. I come out here to support our president, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to be on the go to the poll to watch. A lot of us were excited about the president winning a second term, and a lot of individuals, African Americans in Philadelphia, were, especially men, were talking about the 401k plan and how they were excited because their finances. So when I go to the poll, it was basically they put us at 20 feet away, and they said no cameras, no phones, you cannot take pictures. I was even harassed by some of the Democratic Party poll watchers, and that is also recorded. And then next thing you know, it was 6 feet away, and they still would not allow us to see anything that was happening. We saw people working on the ballots, but we didn't know any names. We didn't see anything. We don't know if people voted twice or 3 times. We didn't know if dead people were voting. But we were there and we were watching. And it's such a shame. This is a democracy, Philadelphia, and they did not allow us to see anything. And was it corrupt or not? But give us opportunity as poll watchers to view all the documents, all the ballots. And listen, you know, we just want a fair election. And we viewed that it was not fair at all. It was not fair to allow us to, you could allow us to look at the ballots, some ballots, but nothing. We were kept away from everything.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Matt Silver. I went for 16 hours straight poll watching. It took about 30, 45 minutes to get through, despite me having credentials of all possible manner. Eventually I showed an email proving that I was supposed to go in. They at least let me through. When I was there, I was turned away for a tablet. They did not want any tablets or computers there. I had to bring that elsewhere. Eventually, when I was let through, you were not able to get anywhere near the ballots. There were 3 rows of people counting ballots. The closest at my day, may have been 15 feet away. Then there was another row, then there was another row. To the extent that you could see anything, we were told repeatedly, including by Democratic poll watchers, including by police, that if they see us taking a photograph or a video, we'll be thrown out and not let back in. The only place you could use a phone was several hundred feet away from the ballots. I don't know what they were trying to protect. When I was there, I saw some people looking at the ballots legitimately. Some people were flipping through them at a rate of every second or so in a way that we specifically could not even see a single thing. To the extent that you could see a thing in certain boxes, I saw they seemed to be, at least certain boxes, seemed to be in the same unusual pen and seemed to have very similar handwriting. Some boxes were normal, some boxes were like that. When they finished with going through boxes, they put them in the very, very back of the room where you couldn't see a thing hundreds of feet away. Then they put supposedly the same boxes, I can't tell if they are or are not, through separate machines where they stripped the ballots, the outer casing with people's signatures, to the privacy ballot. At that point, the actual signatures are completely separate from the privacy ballot, and they'll never be able to be tracked back. What I saw was disturbing, and the process seemed to be specifically so we could not observe, and also so we could not challenge. The only way to challenge something was to call an individual called Seth, who was in the back of the room who could speak to people. And again, they were very worried about photographs and videos.
How were you chosen?
I was asked both by my local ward and the Republican National Lawyers Association. I responded to both. I was willing to do so. There was some type of vetting process, including my bar number and I guess my credentials, and then I was accepted.
And you're an attorney, right?
I am an attorney.
Where did you file a complaint initially? When you saw this behavior happening, who did you go to?
I asked the individuals in the group who were the most senior, and again,
We'll take questions later. When you moved 6 feet closer, as far as you knew, was that based on a court order?
I assume it was a court order. In no case was I closer than 15 feet to anyone counting.
Did they move 6 feet further away?
The closest row for me was 15, 20 feet away. Then there was another row 15, 20 feet beyond that counting, then another 15, 20 beyond that. The only thing I could see at all was the row closest to me.
Okay. And again, how were you selected?
I was selected by the Philadelphia Republican Party.
And credentialed by them?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And we'll have one. Lizette, would you speak for the other group that were not allowed access, which is another category? Would you mind?
Not at all, thank you.
See if I can get this down a little.
I'll stand on my toes.
Want me to hold you up?
Good morning, thanks for being here. I'm Lisette Tarragano. I'm a longtime resident of Philadelphia. T as in Thomas, Arragano. You're welcome. I am a longtime resident of Philadelphia, although not native. And quite frankly, I've always been about, I'm a retired attorney, and I got really, really hepped up about watching voter freedom, freedom of speech, and being able to say the words Donald Trump without getting pushed in the corner. And when I really got excited about being asked to observe ballots was when I felt that my way of life is being put in jeopardy. The American way of life being put down for things I say, who I like, and it's not fair. I'm the child and granddaughter of both Holocaust victims and survivors, and I'm the daughter of a World War II veteran and who fought for and or ran away from horrible, horrible times where people are repressed and sent away. And what I noticed when I was brought in to be a poll watcher, I was never brought in, actually. I never got past the first identification stage. They kept saying that mine, as well as 5 or 6 other Republicans, their names hadn't been entered into the system. And after the first time it happened, the second time it happened, I had no second thoughts about it being a problem, more that somebody failed to finger us into the computer system. But after a while, what I witnessed, and I said to Mr. Giuliani before, in a morbid curiosity staring at, I felt insidious fraud going on. I felt that we were kept away from doing our civil duty. That was everybody on both parties should be upset about. This is horrible. We're being restricted. We're being restrained. And I see this nothing as the insidious nature of the Philadelphia and Pennsylvania governments who are keeping us away from doing what we were meant to do.
Thank you. Thank you. Was that the other 1, 2, 3?
Are here with me today.
The other 3 here are also poll watchers who were deprived of their opportunity to even go into the room. I could have brought, I'm getting a list now to count them, I could have brought about 50 with me, but I didn't do it for 2 reasons. 50 is too many. Number 2, they're afraid. They're afraid of being publicly identified. They're willing to testify in court. They're afraid there'll be repercussions against them because one of the people that did speak on television has already had threats. Jeremy Mercer, who was in charge, has already given a statement twice, both here in Philadelphia the day after the election, I believe, and then he was interviewed on television. Jeremy will basically corroborate the statements that were given about the fact that he was there for 21 hours and then again for another couple of hours. He believes about 300,000 ballots went through. He was unable to see any of them. He requested an opportunity to do so numerous times. Then they went to court. They got an order that they could be 6 feet closer. They were put six feet closer, and the tables they were observing were put at least 6 feet further away, or the people moved to tables that were further in the back. The other witnesses who we've interviewed, and we've interviewed about half of the 50, all corroborate to a T exactly what you see here, that they thought they were going to show up to do an inspection. Some of them had inspected absentee ballots before, where you're shown the ballot. The Republican is shown the ballot. The Democrat is shown the ballot. Neither objects, you put it in. If either objects, you put it aside for discussion later. Nothing like that happened here at all. This is a gross miscarriage of the process that would assure that these ballots are not fraudulent. It's a fraud, an absolute fraud. I mean, you can't just submit these ballots and not have them checked. They're highly suspect ballots, mail-in ballots. It's also highly suspect because it's almost mathematically impossible, several people have already testified, to close the lead that Biden closed when things closed on Tuesday night. President Trump was ahead by almost 800,000 votes. And it took a couple of days to be able to produce enough ballots to bring it down. Now, could some of those ballots have been manufactured in advance by the Democrat machine of Philadelphia? It wouldn't be the first time they did it. And then exactly why didn't they want the ballots inspected if the ballots are legitimate? It would seem to me, knowing the suspicion that would exist on a political machine like this, with the reputation that it has, you would go to the extra extent to be transparent. Instead, they went to an extra extent to be secretive, as did the Democrat Party in pretty much the cities they control as a machine like this one. Because although we don't have as many complaints yet, we've got about 12 in Atlanta, we've got about 15 in Detroit, we've got about 20 more in the rest of Michigan. I would say in at least 10 states now, we have complaints almost exactly like this. This will be a statewide case because there are 300,000 ballots equally in question in Pittsburgh with witnesses similar to these witnesses. In some cases, they actually saw a little bit more that would suggest that the ballots were being tampered with, but I have to wait until they're all fully debriefed. Bernie?
Number two, what evidence, concrete evidence, can you point to that the ballots themselves, not the people who are watching, but that the ballots themselves are being tampered? The first thing is possible conception.
Well, let me first of all, obviously he's not going to concede when at least 600,000 ballots are in question. It's not my job to determine if the ballots are right or not. It's their job. But with a mail-in ballot or an absentee ballot, the burden under law is on the party that's proposing it, which is why it has to be inspected. It's not my, how can I possibly tell you there's fraud or no fraud? The way they conducted themselves, because it looks, I can't tell you exactly what's on the ballot. They conducted themselves in a way that suggests that there was fraud. One of the things that does involve fraud is not making it possible for the people who are supposed to inspect. That's a fraud. That's a fraud on the voters. The voters expect that their inspectors are going to be able to inspect. The voters were defrauded of that right. We will not know if those 600,000 ballots were valid, invalid, or not. Having conducted themselves that way, they certainly present a very strong circumstantial case that the ballots were tampered with. Also, the highly unusual, almost mathematically impossible reduction in the vote in that period of time also raises the question that the ballots were tampered with. So they've done everything they can to yell out to you we were tampering with the ballots without being stupid enough to show it to you. They kept our inspectors away. They kept our inspectors away uniformly. I don't think we're going to find a single Republican that ever got to look at one of those ballots when the law requires that we are allowed to look at them. They did it here, and they did it in Pittsburgh. That can't be a coincidence. How do they figure out in Pittsburgh they should do the same thing that happened here? And they didn't do it in other places. I'm sorry. I'm going to ask Corey Lewandowski to explain his experience. Now, I said I'm going to have...
Well, I appreciate you being here today. Let me just give you one concrete example, not anecdotal, but concrete example of what we believe to be valid voter fraud in the state of Pennsylvania. I draw your attention to an obituary listed for one Denise Ondish in Allegheny County, born 9/10/1946, deceased 10/22/2020. Her application to vote was received on 10/23, the day after she died. It was then mailed by the county back to her on 10/24/2020, 2 days after she had legally passed away. And the ballot was then received back at the county office on November 2nd, 2020. And when you go to the Secretary of State's website today, it says that she voted in this election effective November 2nd, 2020, a full 9 days after Miss Ondish of Allegheny County passed away. This is not, excuse me, this is not empirical, this is not anecdotal. This is hard evidence, and if you do your jobs from the media, I'm sure you'll find additional examples, and this will be one of many that we will be filing with the court. Thank you very much.
Also, when you say that there's no evidence, the people standing behind me are called witnesses. They will eventually, soon hopefully, appear in court and give this testimony, because we're going to file a federal lawsuit that will cover here and Pittsburgh, and we will have as many witnesses as the court needs. Right now it could be as many as 90 witnesses. That's called evidence that there was a uniform deprivation of the right to inspect, which constitutes a fraud on the people of Pennsylvania, constitutes a fraud on all legitimate voters. Any illegitimate vote cancels a legitimate vote. And the burden of proof as to whether it's a legitimate ballot or not when it's a mail-in ballot is on the person proposing the ballot, because there's no other way to justify it. Well, they made it impossible to view those ballots, and there can be only one conclusion as to why you would make it so impossible. Because many, many of them were fraudulent. And you just don't lose leads like that without corruption. And you're in a city in which voter fraud is professional. It's not just amateur. Some places may be amateurs at voter fraud. Philadelphia is a professional place for voter fraud because you have a decrepit Democrat machine that you have had in power for 60 years, and it's the reason why you have voter fraud. It's the reason why you have so much crime. It's the reason why you're leading the country in some categories of crime, because these people are not helping the people of Philadelphia. Their loyalty is to the Democrat Party. Oh, please, please. I'll answer 3 questions, one at a time. I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. Wiener? Who is a winner or a cheater? Oh, is he a winner or a cheater? Well, that's what we want to find out. We have a right. I mean, here's what I can say about this evidence. This evidence is overpowering in that it suggests we need a very, very detailed hearing. We have to find out exactly how many ballots are implicated, how many ballots were not inspected. The estimates I have so far, but we haven't finished this investigation, is there was about 150 to 200,000 ballots here and about 300,000 ballots in Pittsburgh. It may be more, it may be less. Now that's very serious, because the margin of victory after being behind by 800,000, was only about 40,000. And it's a little odd that every vote from Tuesday on was all for the one candidate. There's also a very strange thing that happened, which will be part of our case. At some point during the process, when the lead of President Trump reduced from something like 50,000 to 30,000, at the time it was at 50,000, 94% of the vote had been cast. And when we got to 30,000, it was only 90% of the vote cast. Now, I can get experts to tell you how that happens. That happens because, think about it, you increase the denominator. What do you increase the denominator with? New ballots. Nobody was informed of new ballots, unless people were writing them up. This will be a very, very strong case. And I know you won't accept it because of your hateful biases, but let's see if you can try thinking rationally. The poll? Because they don't decide the election. The call for Joe Biden is it? Who was it called by? Oh my goodness, all the networks. Wow. All the networks. We have to forget about the law. Judges don't count. All the networks thought Biden was going to win by 10%. Gee, what happened? Come on, don't be ridiculous. Networks don't get to decide elections. Courts do. Of course, courts set aside elections when they're illegal. In this particular case, I don't know if there's enough evidence to set aside the entire election. Certainly not around the country, maybe in Pennsylvania. However, there certainly is enough evidence to disqualify a certain number of ballots. The ballots that were not properly inspected should be thrown out. And that number of ballots should be taken out of the count. That could affect the election. Shh. Shh. I can't hear two people at once. I'm sorry. That's a whole new issue. That's a whole new issue that we're just developing. Seems to be a significant number of ballots, and there seems to be a significant number of, I shouldn't say significant, there seems to be 3 or 4 very credible witnesses that there was backdating going on, and there are direct witnesses for that, but I'm sure you'll call that not evidence. Not you, the general mob.
Can you just speak to the legal process that you're preparing?
Sure.
You're filing a lawsuit.
Yes.
I imagine in state court.
Yes.
Can you walk us through, that process for us laymen who?
Sure. Simple.
Are you expecting us to go to the Supreme Court? I'll let you take it from there.
Thank you, sir. I can be a law professor. The case that we would file, many cases are going to be filed, some big, some small. This is going to be eventually a big case because it will go beyond Pennsylvania. But right now, the case is a civil rights case. It'll be filed in federal court. I'm sorry. It'll be filed in federal court. You could file it here or Pittsburgh. That'll be the choice of our lawyer who's looking at it now. Since there seem to be more cases in Pittsburgh than here right now, I would guess it would be filed in Pittsburgh, but it would affect both jurisdictions. And what the case alleges is very simply that President Trump's campaign was denied its right to a fair count, which is a deprivation of civil rights. And if that's the case, the court has a wide range of what are called equitable remedies. Equitable remedies could include depriving that jurisdiction of a certain number of votes, equal to the number of votes that are proved to be not inspected properly. It could be to set aside an election, but that could be one of the things we ask for, but I think that if you set aside the votes, you would probably remedy the wrong that was done here. Now, it could turn out as we go beyond Pittsburgh and we go beyond Philadelphia And we have a little bit of evidence elsewhere in another Democratic part of the state that the same thing was going on, that it might spread to there. Where I do see it spreading, however, is sometime next week, unless I'm wrong, I think there'll be a similar case in Atlanta where similar things were going on. Republican inspectors showed up. They expected to inspect, right, like they do for absentee ballots, and they were uniformly kept out. They got to see nothing. And remember, Atlanta had to do the same thing you had to do. They had to catch Biden up because on election night he had lost. And he was down by a very good margin with only 85% to go. Something very similar happened in Michigan, Wisconsin, can't say Arizona, but in almost every state where President Trump had a lead going into the end of election night, some of the leads looking almost mathematically impossible to undo with the 5%, 10%, 20% of the vote. In almost all of those, this practice was followed. And I'm right now trying to find, did we get to see any ballots that were used for that purpose? If that's the case, then we have a massive nationwide lawsuit. So it could affect more than one state. But right now, the one that it definitely affects is the state of Pennsylvania in a very, very big way. But it's not the only infirmity in this state. There are dead people voting, no question about it. We get any number of complaints of that. We have a very serious problem with backdating of ballots, including 4 witnesses now who are testifying to that. Whether that becomes part of this lawsuit or it's something separate, that isn't developed as fast as this has. One last question.
In charge of elections in Pennsylvania are saying that they don't see any evidence of widespread voter fraud. So if the Republicans in charge of some of these counties who are doing this vote counting are saying there's no evidence of that, why is there a discrepancy between the people actually in charge of that and the Trump?
Well, that's like comparing apples and oranges, isn't it? They're not in charge of Philadelphia. How would... I'm glad they didn't see widespread fraud. That was in Republican counties. I don't think there was fraud in Republican counties.
Right here in Philly, I have spoken to a Republican commissioner who is absolutely clear that he and other Republicans were able to watch the count here and that it was...
Well, then let him come and tell me that. I haven't found one who's willing to tell me that. Let him give me an affidavit under oath, under penalty of perjury. You're telling me these people are lying?
No, not at all. And I was going to say, I'm not disrespecting what they are.
Well, I've spoken to about 50 people. I have statements from 25. We've spoken to 50. Every single inspector. Oh, no. I didn't speak to them. Are you the lawyer for the other side, by the way? Well, you should get paid for it. The reality is that nobody has come forward, even though I've called the state party, the city party. I've asked, is there anyone that wants to come forward and say that there's anything unusual about the man in charge of this whole process, who watched the whole thing, has already come forward and given us a signed statement that no one got a chance to inspect. Now, unless this man had a secret opportunity to do it, there was one person in charge of all these people. He was there constantly for both days. Not a single Republican got a chance to view a single ballot. Now, if we got to view 10 or 12, well, then we'll reduce our number from 120,000 to 110,000. But you produced this man for me. So far, he hasn't come out of the woodwork. And, well, then, maybe, yeah. Well, if I were the commissioner of this city, I don't think I would admit that I didn't allow people to do this. I mean, there was last time a Republican played ball with Democrats like that in New Jersey. He went to jail for 10 years.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Very much.
We were not allowed in to watch, period.
I'm all over it. All right, guys, you heard it. Rudy Giuliani laying out a very clear case, in my opinion, of what the Trump team expects to do at this point. It's very interesting how the response we get from the media in regards to this. I feel like they spend more time discrediting the claims than actually investigating it.
Yep. The media wants to be the litigators. They want to be the defense for the other side. Let's get that clear. The mainstream media is not our friend. There is not one Republican outlet that will have Republicans' backs. There's not one outlet, period, that will have Republicans' backs, that will have conservatives' backs, that will have Americans' backs, because that's what we are. We are Americans. They are a pit of snakes, the mainstream media, and that is why Right Side Broadcast Network is here today.
Absolutely. You heard a lot of questions from the media here, and a lot of it was very vicious. Instead of getting to the bottom of it, it was almost disclaiming what he was saying.
Yeah, and I know Mr. Giuliani actually asked one of the reporters asking a question, are you working as a lawyer for the other side? Because, these questions, they're just, again, like you said, trying to undermine the legal process right now. And they're just trying to discredit instead of going out and actually finding truth to the claims or not, proving to the American people whether or not this was a fair election.
And we heard several claims from a lot of volunteers that oversight the election here. And of course, they all stated they were pushed back 6 feet when the table was moved 6 feet forward. And it seems like if you've got nothing to hide, why wouldn't Joe Biden want to be as transparent with what happened? Why wouldn't both sides want to be transparent to what happened? Why is it the Trump team that's got to consistently try to find out exactly what happened here?
Absolutely. I don't know if there's much more to add. You basically have broke it all down. Interesting day in American politics. We'll see what happens as the days move forward, how Team Trump and the Trump campaign litigate this election fraud that they believe has happened. And we will continue to bring you coverage of everything, and of course always do it with truth and integrity, and give you live uninterrupted coverage of Trump events as they go forward.
Absolutely. If you're just joining us, we just wrapped up a press conference here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, as the Trump team, the legal team, came forward to lay out their plans to challenge a lot of this in the courts. And of course, we are off now back to Arch Street and 12th Street, right outside the convention center, as at about 12 o'clock, I'm sure it's already kicked off by now, a Trump rally planned there. We will bring all that content to you uninterrupted, as we always do. And as always, for more information, go to our Facebook page, go to our YouTube page, subscribe, like, share for a friend, because this is a historical moment here in our country, and we are just so thankful to be able to bring this all to you uninterrupted.
Yeah, one last thing I'd like to add is just don't listen to the mainstream media saying, keep fighting, keep praying. This isn't over yet.
It is not over yet. All right, Joe, we'll send this back to the studio. We'll see you back on Arch and 12th Street for the Trump rally plan for today. Back to you guys.